The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you 15-minute interviews with the candidates for Gloucester School Committee. There are 6 seats. The election is November 5th. The League is a nonpartisan organization for women and men, which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. I'm June Michaels, and the candidate with me is Samantha Watson. We're going to start by having the candidate introduce herself to you and to tell you about her background and her reasons for running for school committee.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I grew up in Gloucester. I've lived here most of my life, with the exception of going to college. I came back as I graduated in 2008 and couldn't find a job, as most people couldn't. And I went back to school and got my master's in social work. So I'm a licensed social worker, and most of my work has been here in this community, first with Pathways as a social worker and as a in-home family therapist at Children's Friend and Family, also in Gloucester. In addition to that, I'm a parent of 2 young girls. I have a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, both of whom will be in the Gloucester Public Schools. And so, in my opinion, I represent a voice that's been underrepresented on the school committee as a mental health clinician. I don't think anybody's ever had a mental health background on the school committee, and I think with a population that's over 50% high needs, it's about time that mental health becomes part of the conversation.
Very interesting. Where do you think the Gloucester school system will be 5 years from now? In other words, what is the most pressing need that the school committee needs to be addressing?
Sure. Well, mostly why I'm running is because I think we need to focus on social emotional learning in our schools. And what I mean by that is really sort of understanding how adverse childhood experiences impact learning. It's been shown in research that children have a difficult time learning if they don't feel safe. And so I would like our conversation to always focus on a district-wide approach on how we deal with social barriers to learning, like poverty and trauma. Because if we're not focusing on building relationships and making kids feel safe, we're going to be implementing sort of difficult or inappropriate disciplinary action. And behaviors are going to be misunderstood. And that impacts not only the child's ability to learn, but the resiliency of teachers. Teachers really need the skills to be able to sort of piece through what the behavior looks like and where it's coming from. Because if the more we learn about behavior, the more we can help kids learn. And so if we're not focusing on that as a district, there's many kids who are going to sort of go through our schools without the understanding that they're loved and they feel safe. And despite their background, we're not going to give up on them. We want to be able to give them just as much of an opportunity to learn as everybody else.
Are there some specific positions or programs you would add to the schools?
So for those of you that don't know, Veterans is a trauma-sensitive school, Veterans Elementary School. In my opinion, I think the entire district should be trauma-sensitive. What I've heard from some schools is that that doesn't really match our population, as some of the elementary schools might have a different high needs population than, say, Vets. Vets is 80% free and reduced lunch, over 70% high needs. Other schools are not quite as big of a high needs population, but the entire district is over 50% high needs. And so, in my opinion, we need to be taking an entire district approach to sort of understand how to meet those social barriers to learning. And really what that means is there should be a golden thread that follows kid from kindergarten all the way through high school. And we should be all speaking the same language and having the same goals.
Well, you mentioned Veterans School. The city has pretty much decided now to combine the Veterans Elementary and the East Gloucester Elementary into one school at Veterans that will have 440 students.
Sure.
So this is going to require debt exclusion. And the question is, what's the most important thing you want voters to know? There will be a long process of design before they're asked to vote on it. What do you want to tell the voters about this project?
Sure. I mean, to be completely honest, I'm fully in support of the project of combining both schools. I do feel like it's important for people to understand that with a bigger school, and I don't think 440 kids is too many. When I went to school at Fuller, there was over 800 kids. And when I went to school at Fuller, we had fully separate art rooms, music rooms, gymnasiums, cafeteria, auditorium. And that's what kids are going to gain when we get new facilities. But in addition to that, we're going to have more increase in resources. There's going to be more collaboration among staff. If there are 2 social workers in the school, they're going to be more equipped to deal with the everyday sort of crises that happen in a school, but also sort of the IEP needs, right? Right now, they all have just one. And so I think sort of the mental health professionals in the schools are really stretched thin with how many needs we're seeing in our schools. In addition to that, right now our fully separate classrooms for kids with disabilities are separated into 2 schools. So VETS has K through 1, if I'm not mistaken, and West Parish has 2 through 5. And with this new project, it's my understanding that that fully separate program will be in one school. It's not, we're not sure which school it's going to be in. And I think that that's really important for people to understand, because that's a really high-risk population, and the less transitions that group has, the better. In addition to that, we're increasing safety, and we're increasing sort of an asset in our community. With the new designs, the big parts of the building, so the cafeteria and the gymnasium, can be used in the community when the school is closed, because we can lock down the actual school building, the hallways, and that they're designing it so that as a community we can still use those spaces. And how important is that for us to have these communal spaces for kids to be able to still use for after school sports or weekend sports, indoor farmers markets. I mean, there's so many opportunities for us to sort of be able to use these buildings versus just having them closed down during the off season.
So the community will still be able to use, say, the athletic fields, because I know losing Mattis Field is an issue for many people.
Sure. I don't know if there's going to be an athletic field in the current design. There's going to be a playground at the Green Street site. I think there was going to be an athletic field built into that. But as you know, part of the cost of the project would be relocating the baseball field and the lights.
So I take it you support the project.
I do.
Very good.
And the one thing that I would like to say is that I hope that the debate about the site doesn't undermine the need for new facilities in our school. And I think that the conversation has focused so heavily on the site instead of sort of the needs of our students and our teachers. And I'm listening to the teachers and the principals at the schools, and the needs are incredible. And I think those are the voices that we really need to be paying attention to, because it impacts retention in our teachers, it impacts morale, and that needs to be part of the conversation. And I do think that if, as a community, we can't get behind the education of our young people, then as a community we have a lot of work to do on a whole.
You mentioned students need to feel safe in order to learn. Do you feel that safety is sufficient? Are we doing enough to make the children safe in the schools?
Sure. I think if you visit some of our older elementary schools, no. I think they're doing what they can with what they have, and they're making improvements as necessary. But that's part of the argument for new facilities, is that they're not really designed with optimum safety in mind. But there's two pieces of safety that I think we need to talk about. There's emotional safety and there's physical safety. And I think on a whole, we need to do a much better job of making sure that kids feel emotionally safe in our schools. And that means focusing more on bullying. And I understand that the schools have done a lot of work on bullying, and they've made a lot of progress. But understanding what cyberbullying means and what our cell phone policies are, and making sure that we get that safety doesn't just stay in the classroom, it sort of happens after. And so we're trying to teach kids skills on how to treat each other with respect, so that when they come into the school buildings, they're feeling safe overall, not just physically safe.
Now, Gloucester sends quite a few students to the Rockport school system and other districts for school choice. This is the same question that was asked at the Gloucester Daily Times forum. What would you do on the school committee to encourage students to choose Gloucester as a school to stay in?
So, and I said this at the Gloucester Daily Times debate, the first thing that we need to do is understand why people are leaving. And so part of my campaign is trying to sit down with young parents whom I know who have chosen to choice out, to really understand why they feel like it's important that their kids go to Rockport versus Gloucester. And I think as a whole, our district needs to have a better plan on how to not only just sort of recruit families, so making sure that young families understand the good work that's being done. So starting in preschool, starting engaging people in the community much earlier, but also try to reach out to people who have left to gain understanding. Why do you feel like Rockport's meeting your needs better than Gloucester? In addition to that, we need to do a better job of public relations. Our website is really hard to navigate.
So what would you say are the strong points of the school system that you would advertise more?
I mean, there are so many things that I'm learning throughout this process that I didn't even know existed in Gloucester. Now that I've talked to all the principals, the science program at O'Malley is one of the best in the state. So, there's an aquaponics program, robotics program. There's an engineering program both at the middle school and the high school. The AP program at the high school has grown leaps and bounds. Obviously, our extracurricular activities far outweigh other districts around the area. And just experiencing being educated here is just, you can't compare it. I mean, I've done it, and I can't wait for my kids to be educated here. It's a great place to live, and it's a great place to learn, in my opinion.
So, we're coming down to the end of the interview. I want to give you a minute to mention anything else that we didn't talk about.
Sure.
And talk to the voters.
The only thing that I would say, in addition to the lovely questions, is that I'm number 7 on the ballot. And so I've been told that matters. That being number 7 is slightly unlikely, but I'm using it to my advantage, and I'm encouraging people to vote number 7 first. Thank you.
So on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank our candidate, Samantha Watson, for coming in to be interviewed and participating in this, and for running. We encourage people to run for public office, and I want to remind everyone to vote on Tuesday, November 5th. The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you 15-minute interviews with the candidates for Gloucester School Committee. There are 6 open seats, and the election is November 5th. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization for women and men which encourages public activity and participation in politics. I'm June Michaels, and the candidate with me now is Joel Favara. We're going to start by giving the candidate 2 minutes to introduce himself to you and explain what his background is and why he's running for school committee. Joel?
Thank you. My name, as you said, is Joel Favara. I am a local real estate attorney. I am the father of 3 young children and the guardian for a senior at the high school. My wife is a middle school teacher in Rockport, and I am a product of the Gloucester public school system, K through 12. So my interest and my drive is multifaceted. Obviously, as a property owner in Gloucester and a business owner in Gloucester, I know that the decisions being made about the school department, which from a budgetary standpoint is the largest city department, has impacts both on homeowners throughout the city by way of the annual tax levy. It also has implications for businesses in Gloucester. If you have an attractive school district, you are able to attract talented employees, you're able to attract families to move in and utilize your businesses. But then obviously I have 3 young children, all of whom will be entering the Gloucester public school system. My oldest son, Giuseppe, will be in kindergarten next year. And as I also mentioned, I have a graduating senior this year, so I've been involved for the last 12 or 13 years seeing the process on a more parental side. And being married to a school teacher, I have some insight as to, what the life of a teacher is really like and what happens outside of those 6 or 7 hours that you spend inside the classroom, how much work comes home with you, how much work over the vacations, you end up doing. And so I think that helps me kind of empathize to a degree with the teachers in our district. On the flip side, not to, pat her on the back too hard, my wife's a very talented teacher, and so I think she provides me opportunity to see what skilled educators look like. And, I can use her sort of as a benchmark, I suppose. So for all those reasons, I'm on the school committee currently and looking to continue on the school committee for a 3rd term.
Very interesting. Where do you think the Gloucester schools will be over the next 5 years and 5 years from now? So what's the most pressing need that the schools have that the school committee needs to address over the next 5 years?
So there are, I'm going to answer that with three different things that need to be addressed simultaneously. There's an easy one and then 2 more hard ones. One of the hard ones is regionalization. As you will likely hear from me a lot on this campaign, I'm convinced that we need to begin exploring regionalization with Rockport. I think both districts, unless there is a massive influx of students over the next few years, cannot continue to exist isolated from one another. I think the Rockport school system and the Gloucester school system both have complementary strengths, and I think that if we did a good job regionalizing the two, we would be able to really address some of the issues that both districts are facing. From a plant standpoint, meaning physical facilities, we have a high school that's built essentially at sea level. We just spent $3 million on a stadium below sea level, which blows my mind that we did that, but we've done it. And so those are enormous challenges that are going to present themselves over the next few years from a climate change standpoint. And then one of the things I think we should be tackling is adjusting school start times. I would love to see the middle school and the high school both start at least an hour later than they do now. There's piles of scientific evidence out there that says by making that one change to your district, academic performance goes up, attendance rates go up, car accidents go down, student illness goes down, negative social emotional behavior goes down, and there's really no cost to the district. You're just shifting the time, which is the same facility is doing the same thing, just later in the day. And I kind of call that the easy one. That's one of the easier things to tackle, but I think it's absolutely crucial that we tackle it within the next few years, based on what's out there available to us now for information.
That's interesting. That's one that has not been brought up very often. Now, the decision has been made by the city to move ahead with designing a 440-student school at the Veterans site, combining the Veterans and East Gloucester Elementary School. This will require a debt exclusion to pay for it. The question is, what's the most important thing you want to tell the voters as the city proceeds with the design and prepares the question for the debt exclusion?
So I would say to the voters that this was not the best result possible. There were better options that have been presented to the city pretty much for the last decade. However, we are in the path, or on the path that we are on. And if someone like myself, who isn't thrilled with the site location or some of the other choices that have been made up until this point, were to try and dismiss the good in hopes of achieving the great, I think we'd find ourselves in a worse situation. Another thing I bring up constantly is, what I call ticking time bombs across the city. We have major capital issues across the city. The easiest one to point to is the sewer treatment plant. We are on a waiver right now from the federal government to allow us to continue to use the sewer treatment plant we have without a secondary treatment facility addition onto it. That's north of $100 million worth of upgrade if and when the waiver is no longer renewed and an enforcement order comes from the federal government. The second that bomb goes off on Essex Ave, we won't be able to build another thing for a decade plus. So if we have the capacity now to get this school in the pipeline, get it started, maybe even get it finished before that one goes off, I think we're making the right choice, because again, if that bomb goes off, we will be financially incapable of replacing East Gloucester and Vets, no matter how great a site gets selected or how great a design gets chosen. So it's not the best we could have done, but it is the better choice to continue with this process than to end it because it didn't come out as great as some of us would have hoped it would have.
Very interesting. I'd like to ask you about security in the schools. Do you think the city is doing enough to make students feel safe and be safe in the schools?
So, it's one of those two-sided coins, right? Although I guess all coins are two-sided. But you have, the more students are training through these ALICE drills, et cetera, to become quote-unquote safe in the schools, the less safe they feel. And so, the more lockdown drills, the more active shooter drills these students go for, the less safe they feel, although theoretically, by going through it, in the event of an emergency, they would be safer and they would have the skills necessary to address it. One of the things I think the city is focused on is physical security. I've mentioned this before. The city's about to spend $1.5 million basically armoring the entrance to the Gloucester High School. And if you break that math out, you could take $1.5 million and you could hire 2 full-time school psychologists for 10 years. And maybe that would help address, the situations that would lead to the need for an armored front entrance, essentially, in a command center and that sort of thing. That might all not be necessary if you're able to reach the students who would otherwise be perpetrating these horrendous acts ahead of time before they've, gone down that path. And so I think there's, value in providing physical upgrades to the facilities for safety reasons, but I think we're focusing too heavily on that being the only thing. We're just kind of saying, someone is going to come start trouble at this school, and we need to prepare for it. Is there a way to look at, the silver lining to the carnage that's been happening for the last 20 years in our country is that there's incredible amounts of data about school shootings and other horrendous things that happen in schools because so many have happened. And if anything is to be gained from, again, this horrendous pattern, it would be learning, where these shooters took the wrong turn onto this path of coming back to the school armed and looking to hurt people. And are we able to allocate resources to identify and help those students before those students become problematic to that degree?
Very interesting. I'd like to ask you about school choice. What can the city do to keep students in the Gloucester school system, or to make the school system attractive to school choice students from other communities?
So I think one of the biggest struggles that our district has is reputation. And I think the reputation was, earned rightfully when it came to, 20 years ago, but I don't think it's fair anymore. The classic example being the middle school. I attended O'Malley in the 90s, and I recall, again, when Gracie, my oldest, was in elementary school, I remember thinking, okay, well, we have 5 years to figure out where she's going to middle school because we can't send her to O'Malley. I remember what O'Malley was like, and I would never send anyone I cared about. And that was the mindset. And then the innovation plan was accepted. The school began turning itself around, and I went and toured the school. I said, let's pretend I don't know anything about the school. Let me put aside my prejudices. Let me put aside my, personal anecdotal memory of this school and just go see what's actually happening now. At the time, it was 2012. And it, blew me away. And she was there for all 3 years, and the academic and extracurricular experience she was having, blew me away compared to what it was like when I was there myself. And so I would suggest to people looking to choice out, or people considering even choicing in, which would be even better, is just tell them, hey, ignore what you've heard. Just come see it for yourself. Make your own decision. Don't let someone else tell you what's good or what's bad here. Just come look at the school. The schools, please, you take an elementary student's family through the New West Parish, and you see both, obviously the physical facility is impressive, but just, the amenities they have over there and the resources that are provided to their students, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people, if they took a genuine look at what we have to offer, turning away. I think most of the people that turn away are turning away based on lack of information. There's certainly people who are making the choice after studious research, and that's fine. This district isn't for everybody, and that's why school choice exists. But I think I would encourage people to actually come see what's actually going on in these schools. The only other part I would add is that one thing the committee keeps talking about, but we can't seem to get any traction on, is North Shore Tech, has a wait list every year. And we have 4 vocational shops at the Gloucester High School. And I don't understand why we aren't annually reaching out to families, Beverly, Danvers, Salem, Peabody, saying, hey, we noticed you weren't accepted into the auto shop or the mechanical shop or the carpentry division of North Shore Tech. Would you like to come tour Gloucester's vocational wing? Because you could choice into Gloucester and still get the trade education you were looking for at North Shore Tech. So that I'd love to see us actually do that. For some reason it gets talked about and never executed, but I would love to see that happen also.
Well, in the minute that remains to us, I'd like you to speak to the voters once more and ask for their vote.
Can I have your vote, please? No, so I think I'm in a unique position in that I have been on the committee for 2 terms, so I have experience, but I've not been on the committee for a decade plus, and I would not consider myself worn down or old guard by any sense. And I'm also the only incumbent who has children entering the district. So these major decisions we're making are going to affect my family on a personal level. As I said in the beginning, they affect all families throughout the city, whether or not you have children in the district. But I have both the experience and the personal connection that I don't think any other candidate on the slate this year has. There are other people running with young children, but they haven't had the experience. There are people with more experience, but they have no vested interest. So that's what differentiates me, I suppose, if I had to give you an elevator pitch.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Joel Favara for coming and talking to us. I want to thank Studio 1623 for airing this, and please remember to vote on November 5th.
The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you 15-minute interviews with the 7 candidates for the 6 positions on the Gloucester School Committee. The League is a nonpartisan organization for women and men, and the League encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. The election is Tuesday, November 5th. My name is Cynthia Bierley. I'm a member of the League, and I'm here with candidate Jonathan Pope, who is also the chairman of the school committee. We're going to start by having the candidate introduce himself and tell you about his background and reasons for running for school committee. Jonathan?
Well, I'd like to start by just thanking the League of Women Voters for doing this work of interviewing the candidates, because it's very important to have an informed electorate, to have, you know, good candidates come forward and people vote for people for, you know, reasons instead of personalities. My name's Jonathan Pope. I grew up in Gloucester. I went to Gloucester schools. I went on to New York University, and then later on to the Boston Architectural Center. I ran Pope cabinets for 30 years and then retired a few years ago. Both of my sons went to Gloucester schools. My oldest son went on to Northeastern. My youngest son went to the New England Culinary Institute, and they both have had very successful careers in their chosen fields. My wife was a teacher. She was just recently retired, and she was the SPED coordinator at Veterans School for the last 12 years. I was first elected to the school committee in 1998. I served for 10 years, and then when my youngest son graduated, I thought I would get off. I did. But then in 2012, I ran again, and I've been on ever since. So this is my 18th year on the school committee. I've been the chairman for 12 of those years. I've been on the Building and Finance subcommittee for all of that time. I was also there when the Gloucester Education Foundation was founded and was involved in the setup of that. I was involved in the creation and was one of the founders of the Gloucester Athletic Association, which spearheaded the work that was done at Newell Stadium, as well as raising money to subsidize student athletic fees. I have been there. I've been there for quite a while. It's, you know.
Where do you think the Gloucester school system will be in 5 years regarding enrollments and the principal needs of the student body? In other words, what do you think will be the most pressing needs the school committee has to address?
Well, as far as enrollment goes, we have to do these enrollment studies when you build a new school. So in the process of trying to get money from the state to build the new combined East Gloucester and Veterans School, we've had to do an enrollment study. And basically they're saying the enrollment is going to be relatively stable, at least in the elementary schools, for the next 5 to 10 years. But they're not always right. When we did the same process when we went to when we did West Parish, and they, by the time we opened it, their numbers were off by almost 100 students. We had 100 more students than they had projected. That being said, across the state, enrollment's declining. People have less kids. Gloucester does not have a lot of affordable housing. It doesn't have a lot of housing that a young family just starting off might buy. It's very difficult. I know that because my son's been looking for a house, and he's got a good job, but he's a single income, and that's hard to do in Gloucester. The average assessed value of a house in Gloucester is $570,000. The odd thing there is that the median value of a house is $460,000. So what that means is that there's a lot of very expensive houses that skew the average. Mm-hmm. But it's so as far as that goes, we're assuming we need the same as we have now as far as facilities go. But the facilities need to be replaced. So one of our plans is we're in the middle of trying to replace East Gloucester and Veterans, and as soon as we finish that, we'd like to start replacing Beaman and Plum Cove, which will bring us down to 3 elementary schools. The high school and the middle school both have excess capacity. There's only about 700 kids just under 800 kids at the high school right now, and just about 600 kids at the middle school. And both of those schools have had populations, have accommodated populations of more than, 300 or 400 more students than are there now. So consequently, what we've done is we've opened negotiations and talks with Rockport, because the obvious thing to be talking with Rockport about is regionalization. They only have about 600 of their own students. They have about 300 of our students. And I can talk about school choice a little bit later. That's one of your questions. But
We could go right to that now.
well, I just wanted to say the other thing about what we need to be teaching kids is really important, because what we need to be teaching kids is really how to figure out and solve problems. Give them the base tools so they can go on the internet and find out the information. When I was a kid, we used to have to memorize dates and capitals and all of that. And now the access to that sort of information is instant for kids today. And what they need to do is know how to access that information and understand it. So it's more that we have to teach kids how to collaborate with each other, to be inquisitive, to be innovative, and to understand sort of general logical principles of how to think. So.
Thank you. Getting back to the combining of East Gloucester and Veterans schools,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand constructing a new 440 student school on Mathos Field at the Veterans School site at an estimated cost of over $70 million. What is the most important thing you want the voters to understand about the final design is prepared and the question of debt exclusion is put to them?
Well, the most important thing to understand is that when the schools that we are replacing were built in the 40s and the 50s, and the whole approach to education at that time is completely different from what we have to do today, and the space requirements are completely different. In 1948, when East Gloucester School was built, there was no mandate from the state to educate all children. In other words, special needs children, if they couldn't educate them, they just didn't. It wasn't until the early 70s that Chapter 766 was passed, and the state said you've got to educate all children until they either graduate or turn 22, and that was a huge change, and it's taken a while to figure out how to do that. I mean, it used to be they just put all these kids into a separate classroom and put a teacher in there and do the best they could with them. And now we understand that you need to integrate these kids, because one of the tenets of Chapter 766 is that they need to be educated in the least restrictive environment, and least restrictive environment is not closed off in a self-contained classroom. I mean, we still have some of those classrooms, but we used to have, when I first got on the school committee, I think we had, I think 10 or 12, and now we have 4. But the students are integrated, and Gloucester has 28% of our students are on individual education plans. So they need special help And it can be, these accommodations, so they have to be pulled out now. So it used to be that to do it with the school buildings we have now, they'd have to be pulled out and taken down the hall and into a special room. The new buildings will have space for that attached right to the classrooms. They'll also have space for doing collaborative work. So if you have somebody that come in and talk to the fourth grade or read to the fourth grade, there'll be a space centered around where the four fourth grades are, where they all can assemble, or they could do projects and not have to put them away. I mean, if they don't want to do a science project, it wouldn't have to be set it up in the classroom and then take it down. So the buildings matter. People seem to think that they don't, that you could, it's all about teaching, and teaching's very important. But buildings are a tool that teachers need so they can do their job well and effectively.
Moving on, do you feel that the security at the schools is sufficient?
Well, security is I mean, there's two different things to talk about here. One is the buildings themselves, and this whole fear of an active shooter or something like that. And the buildings, if you've been to West Parish, you can see the current thinking about how you make a school safe. West Parish has a double entry. You get admitted to the school through a buzzer. There's cameras. They look at you. You walk in. Then you have to walk up to a window and talk to the secretary before she allows you into the second set of doors. The classrooms don't have doors outside. I mean, East Gloucester, all of the other schools besides elementary schools besides West Parish basically have a door outside. And because of the age of the schools, a lot of times they open those doors and leave them open for ventilation because it's either too hot or too cold. So the buildings make a difference. We're currently looking at the high school and the middle school to try to do something about the entryways. But the other piece of it is providing the social emotional support for students who are in distress. Today, the stress levels of kids is very, very high, and we could talk all day about why that might be, but we know it exists. We know that 20 out of 100 kids are basically have an emotional problem that prevents them from learning in some manner. And that's not safe either, because if you don't address those things and students feel like they're not part of the school, they don't have anybody there that they can relate to. So the other piece of safety is to have adjustment counselors and have school psychologists in all of the buildings. So that's.
And in the 1 minute remaining, I'd like to ask you to make a final statement to the voters.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been here, and I guess I've said this before. If you think the schools are doing all right, then you should vote for me. If you don't vote for me, because I've been here and pretty much involved in things from full-day kindergarten. I mean, people don't remember, but in 2002 we had a battle over whether we should expand to full-day kindergarten, and people thought it was horrible, but nobody opted out of it a year later. So those are the kind of things that we need to keep working on.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Jonathan Pope for agreeing to be interviewed, and to thank the 1623 Studios for providing the time to bring the candidates to you. Please remember to vote in the citywide election on November 5th. Thank you.
The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you 15-minute interviews with the candidates for Gloucester School Committee. There are 6 open seats, and the election is November 5th. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization which encourages the active participation of citizens in government. The candidate with me is Kathy Clancy, and I'm going to give her, I'm June Michaels with the League. I'm going to give Kathy 2 minutes to introduce herself to you, to tell you what her background is and why she's running for school committee.
Great. Thank you very much, June, and thank you for hosting this forum for all the school committee candidates to get the word out on who's running. My name is Kathy Clancy, and I've been on the school committee for 5 terms now, so I'm running for re-election for my 6th term. I got involved in the schools when my son was 3.5 years old. Initial involvement was with Gloucester Education Foundation. I felt that given my professional background and my love of the community, it would be a good use of my time and my talents. My background was finance. I just feel that I bring a lot in terms of finding opportunities for students and bringing new ideas, and also kind of a fiscally prudent approach to the way we manage and prioritize our budgets. So I remain passionate. We've made a lot of progress, and I'm really excited to be running for re-election again.
What do you think is going to be the pressing issue or issues for the school system over the next 5 years?
Well, obviously one of them is the aging infrastructure that we have in our elementary schools. I think the City Department of Public Works has done a good job in terms of maintenance and kind of holding their own on some of our buildings, but many are beyond their useful life. So right now we're doing the East Gloucester Veterans Project. So that's one. Enrollment actually has been fairly stable, so that's a good thing, and it's projected to be stable for probably the next 5 to 10 years, according to our the work with the Mass School Building Authority, which does an enrollment study when we get into a project like Veterans and East Gloucester School. So that said, one of the big things is that we've had a very high amount of English language learners enter our community, which is great. They add certainly a new dimension to the community, which is fabulous, but they need to have the supports and the education that they need to get to be speaking English and being able to kind of learn, which is, I'm sure is difficult for them, learning with the second language of English. We also have other economic issues in town, such as low income and students with disabilities. So those are going to be continuing issues into the future as we progress. And then finally, I think given the ever-changing world of careers and opportunities and different industries, we need to make sure our kids are prepared to pursue things that we inspire them for certain interests so that they can figure out what might be their passion as they go forward in life. So keeping on top of things like 5 years ago, we would have never thought about a 3D printer. And, we have a state-of-the-art 3D printer at the high school. We have maker spaces, and we have all sorts of collaborative ways of teaching and learning and project-based learning. We have an amazing program in robotics, which is really at the forefront of that particular field. So there are things we're doing, but those are just examples of how we really need to stay on top of what the demands are of our students, as well as keeping them inspired for their future opportunities.
I keep hearing about the robotics.
Yes. My son it's his favorite class this year. He's a sophomore, and he stays after school for the first time without me prodding him to keep working on his projects. So yeah, it's
Very
great.
good. So the city has decided to move ahead with combining the East Gloucester and the Veterans Elementary Schools into one new 440 student school at the Veterans site. And this will, of course, require a debt exclusion. So what is the most important thing you want the voters to understand as the design is finalized and the debt exclusion question is put to them?
Sure. We were one of 17 chosen in 2016, I believe, at the Mass School Building Authority in terms of the school being, East Gloucester School being in the greatest need out of like 92 applications. So the need is there to replace our schools. So I would want people to know that, this isn't just us saying our buildings are inadequate and aging, and the learning space is not right for the current day learning environment, and it's also not the right size. But that, a state agency who's in the business of helping communities go forward with projects like this agreed completely by choosing us. We've gone through a very thorough process. I serve on the building committee. I also served on the building committee for West Parish, which was built, on time and under budget. And we hope that this project would go as smoothly. The goal of the school committee, when we put forth a master plan, was to bring our 5 elementary schools down to 3, so that we were mindful of the community's ability to pay, but also so that we could get more students in an updated learning environment sooner. So by combining 2 communities, 2 very strong school communities, into one building would maximize the investment in the building itself, but also in our education offerings, like having an art room as opposed to having the art teacher be art on a card, or also transferring between one school and another, because that's the way it is at East Gloucester and Veterans. They have a part-time allocation of an art teacher. So just even that time alone will allow an art teacher to really set up for the kids, be ready for the kids, and have the kids have more time on learning, with which to do projects that actually don't have to be done and taken down every time they have art class. So I'd want people to know that this is a wonderful opportunity for us. We considered a lot of the feedback from the community and their desire to hold on to open space. And I believe that Veterans was the solution that kind of did the least harm in terms of, building on a site that's already in a school. Most of the students actually are around Veterans School. If you drew a circle around where the families live, Veterans happens to be pretty much smack in the middle of East Gloucester and Veterans School community of students. So I think that was a big overwhelming factor as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I learned something new from each interview from the candidates.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about school safety. Do you think the city is doing enough to make the students feel and actually be safe in the schools?
School safety is definitely a concern, across the country and everywhere. We have a couple projects on the horizon for the middle and high school to create double entry doors so that we can have that extra checkpoint. We want our schools to be welcoming, but we also need to make sure who's coming into our schools. That's another reason why doing East Gloucester and Veterans together would provide that particular added layer of safety. I think our students are very aware, and particularly at the high school level, and their reaction to the Parkland shooting last year, that we thankfully have high school students who have spoken out, and we hope that with students speaking that it will bring change on a federal level. We can be very hopeful of that. I think safety is more than just the intruder. It's being safe in school and feeling supported. Having resource officers at school who are a positive presence of the police. They're not just there to keep an eye on kids, they're there to really actually be mentors and engage with the students and be a positive and educational influence for them. We have anti-bullying programs in our schools. Those are ways kids feel unsafe. So there are many aspects of having a student and even the staff feel safe, and we want them to be focusing on learning, not being focused on their safety.
Very good. School choice is an issue for Gloucester. You send several students to Rockport. What can the city do to make Gloucester schools the schools of choice, both for Gloucester residents staying in the system and attracting students from other communities?
Well, I have, from the time I decided to send my schools to my child to our schools, have always sung the praises of our schools. Our teachers are terrific. They're very caring. We have terrific programs. So I think my first thing I would say to anybody, go visit the school. Even if you're going to go to that school, go visit the school and get to know the principal and ask the questions that make you feel comfortable with your choice and set your expectations. I find a lot of parents who have reached out to me and asked me about transitioning to 6th grade or transitioning to 9th grade. And I tell them to go in and talk with the principal, ask your questions. Your child will be challenged if that's your concern at the high school. We have AP classes, 11 advanced placement classes. We have all sorts of different curriculum offerings. At the middle school, we have an amazing after-school program, which is all extended learning. It's not just fluffy stuff, but it's fun learning after school. There are multiple programs in the fall, winter, and spring. And people rave about it. Over a third of our kids participate in that after-school program at the middle school. So I think there's many opportunities for families to find their place. We have very good support staff, if that is, one of your concerns. And even though maybe some of our buildings don't look terrific on the outside, I encourage everyone to come in because it's where the learning happens, is inside. And O'Malley may seem imposing, but it's organized in a house structure, and that may make people more comfortable that their child has 4 core teachers. I just hope people get informed. And the last thing we can do as a school district is be better about communicating and really just continually bring the message of the good things that are happening. Our elementary schools have excelled in the MCAS this year, and they continue to do so. 4 of them are, 50%, and 3 of them are, 4 of them are at 48% or higher. 3 of them are actually in the low to high 70s, so in terms of state percentiles. So our schools are doing really well. We know where there are needs, and we're constantly investing and prioritizing where those needs are. But I welcome everybody, even people from other communities, to come see and come take advantage of all that we have to offer.
Comparison shopping.
Definitely.
Are there any specific programs that you would add to the school system over the next 5 years?
One thing I've always wanted to expand is our offerings in the arts. We do have a lot of theater and we have music. I think things like string programs and having just much more instrumental instruction would be nice for our kids, and have that as an opportunity. I know that's one of the reasons people may choose Rockport, because they have a strong music program. We'd like to be doing that as well, and I think the more students that play together and have that opportunity, the stronger our program would be. So that would be one area of expansion that I would think would be quite a benefit to our students.
So in the minute that's remaining to us, I'd like you to talk directly to the voters again.
Okay.
And tell them anything that we have not covered.
Okay. My name again is Kathy Clancy. I am delighted to be running for a 6th term. I'm energized by everything that we have accomplished so far. We have a lot of great things going on. I encourage you to really be supportive of our schools, because we have great staff and great administration, and our students are really excelling. So please cheer them on, whether it's at a football game or a soccer game or a play or a music performance. Our kids deserve all of our investment and our attention, and I hope you vote for me on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. So on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank our candidate, Kathy Clancy, for coming in to be interviewed. This is a new format for all of us.
It's very nice.
I want to thank 1623 Studios for allowing us to do these interviews. And I want to remind everyone, November 5th is the election. Please vote.
Please vote.
In need, a child who may be in crisis, and that's a very important security issue, and could be a real advantage to our schools.
Thank you. What would you do to encourage students to choose Gloucester in the school choice program?
My experience with friends whose children who've choiced out for their children is that they're hearing this negative sort of mantra about Gloucester schools. What I would do is start communicating, firstly, the positives. Here are the good things happening in Gloucester schools. Here are the kids that you know. Here's how they're doing in school. They're going to this after-school coding class. They're in the play. They're in the band. They're feeling excited about their learning. I think my real push would be to communicate to people what is happening and to listen to those parents and to hear from them, why aren't you choosing Gloucester? What are you hearing that's making you not choose Gloucester? And another piece of that would be going into the preschools and having some kind of a program with people who run preschools or teach at preschools. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but bringing in Gloucester preschool teachers who in some cases I know are advising children to go out of the system because they think, as many in the community seem to, that the schools aren't good. And if we could sort of bring them in and introduce them to, here's what's happening in Gloucester. Here's the Gloucester maybe that you don't know. I think we could start to turn that around. I think it'll be a gradual change, but I think we can do it.
Thank you. In the few minutes remaining to us, I would like to ask you to make a final statement to the voters and add anything that we didn't talk about. Perhaps there's a question that you wish we had asked you and we didn't, and to bring that up also.
Thank you. My name is Laura Weeson. I'm number 6 on the school committee ballot. I believe that this community has so many great advantages and such a warm, supportive communal spirit. I think that if we bring the community into our schools, both the schools community and the wider community, and say this is our shared endeavor, raising our children with the best tools they can get to go into the future, to build our community, to build the world. I think we can bring all of us into this and bring our skills, whether it's writing or fishing or carpentry or automotive or anything. I know that there's so many people in the community who are already working together with Gloucester schools. I feel like if we can keep doing this and work together, understanding that it's to all of our advantages to have our students be well educated and well informed and critical thinkers for their futures and for ours. So I urge you to vote for me on November 5th. As I said, I'm number 6 on the ballot, and thank you for working with me to improve Gloucester schools.
And was there anything that maybe you would have wished that we had asked you? Anything that you can come up with that you might add to your presentation?
Sure. One thing that one very specific plan I'd like to implement as part of my going out to the community is the school committee needs to take, I think, a larger role in communication. I think we should start having school committee meetings in the schools. So we should be having our meetings at least once a year in each school and listening to students and teachers and caregivers and whoever can come in that more familiar environment. I'm really a believer in the fact that we have sort of some blocked communication spaces and that we need to figure out how to open them up and bring, more and more people into a positive relationship with our schools.
Sounds like a good plan. Thank you all for listening, and I want to remind people to check at City Hall if you aren't sure if you are registered to vote. They will tell you right away, or you can check it online. Voter registration is available online now, which is it's very, very fast. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Laura Weeson for agreeing to be interviewed, and we really appreciate your being here. And for all of you out there, please don't forget, November 5th is the day to vote. Very important election for our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nan.
The League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you 15-minute interviews with the candidates for Gloucester School Committee. The election is Tuesday, November 5th. The League is a nonpartisan organization for women and men, which encourages the informed participation of citizens in their government. I'm June Michaels, and the candidate with me is Ida Shaker. We're going to start by allowing the candidate to introduce herself to you and explain what her reasons are for running for school committee and a little about her background. Ida?
Thank you, June. I've lived in Gloucester for most of my life. I was born here. I have a daughter in the school system. And while I was navigating my own daughter's educational needs, I recognized that there were a lot of similar issues that I experienced when I was a child here in Gloucester. And in that process, I sought out the Special Education Parent Advisory Council within our district. And much to my surprise, we didn't really have an established one. And in the state of Massachusetts, it's actually mandated that every district have a Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So at that point, I reached out to the one woman who had was in charge of starting it up, but just needed some additional help, and I started working with her, and now I serve as the co-chair for our CPAC. From there on, I reached out to the Massachusetts Families Organizing for Change, as well as the Federation for Children with Special Needs, with whom I now help advocate for the educational needs of children. My background is in psychology and early childhood education, so this was almost my purpose, I suppose you could say. So that's essentially why I'm running, to help the other families in our district who are struggling to have their children's needs met.
Well, thank you for running.
Thank you.
Where do you think the Gloucester school system will be 5 years from now regarding enrollment and regarding needs? In other words, what are the most pressing things for the school committee in the next term?
Well, I think in terms of enrollment, the numbers have stabilized, or at least that's what I hear thus far. I know that the district is looking at regionalization and doing some studies there. However, I believe if we do regionalize it will take a considerable amount of time. The process isn't as easy as just having two parties agree. There's quite a bit that goes into the regionalization of schools. In terms of other needs, I think addressing the mental health issues within our district is something that will continue to be an issue. Hopefully we can address those issues efficiently. If I am elected, and even if I'm not elected, I'm going to continue advocating for the needs of children. I have been in contact with several organizations that assist districts in creating a trauma plan. So essentially they would come into the district and train everyone, not just the teachers, but they'll also train the staff, the janitorial team, the lunch ladies. Everyone that works with children that comes in contact with them will be trained in how to identify signs of trauma and how to address those needs and being more sensitive to the needs of children. So I think that's something that will continue on.
Oh, that's very interesting. The school committee has voted in favor of combining the East Gloucester and Veterans Elementary Schools and constructing a new 440-student school at Mattis Field in the Veterans School site at an estimated cost of some $70 million. What is the most important thing you want voters to understand as the final design is prepared and the debt exclusion is prepared for a vote?
Well, I have to be honest, I don't like to go over what we can't change so much anymore. The vet site wasn't my first choice. However, this is where we're at now. And I think it's really important for all of the voters in the entire district to really understand the pressing needs that we have. And whether or not we're happy with the process as it's gone, I think we really need to shift our focus to what our needs are right now. And if we don't address those needs, we'll be much worse, 5-10 years from now. So I'd really like them to understand the needs of children, how we cannot address the educational needs of these students, how the conditions are really unsafe at East Gloucester. We need to do better by our teachers and by our students. And really, ultimately, there is no other choice. I've spoken with the MSBA, and they have essentially said that there has been a few districts that have chosen not to participate because they voted no on the debt exclusion. But ultimately, I was told that a couple of those districts end up going back because they just can't come up with that money. It's a significant amount of money to build new schools. So I would really hope that our voters can set aside their differences and the anger that they feel towards the process that has happened and have faith in whoever they elect next, that they will take that information and they will remember how angry they were because of the process. And, hopefully we can not repeat those same problems again going forward. But right now, let's give the kids what they need.
Very good. Do you feel that security at all the schools is sufficient?
I believe we are addressing the physical security needs at the schools. I know that there's a couple of plans in action, so I won't comment too much on that. What I would like to address again is the mental health needs at our schools. We can, I've said this before, we can reinforce the walls, but that's not doing much to help children's inner sense of security. I think aside from external threats, we have a lot of threats that, 20 years ago we didn't have. The social media has really presented a whole new set of issues for children in terms of their inner well-being. This constant need to compare yourself to others is a lot. Bullying is still an issue that, we don't really hear so much about anymore, but it still exists. I mean, from the parents that I've spoken to, it's still a heavy concern. And, I've heard, parents move their kids from one school to another, and then some who have choiced out into Rockport. And, how the schools are actually addressing those bullying concerns is not where it should be. I think here's the thing about bullying is that what is defined as bullying is unclear, even within our own district plan. So tracking it, a lot of times they say, oh, well, kids will be kids. But if you have one student that goes to school every day and has a separate issue with a bunch of different students where that student becomes a target, that's overwhelming. It could cause developmental trauma even. So I don't know that we're taking that as seriously as we should be. So I think when you discuss whether or not it's sufficient, I would say no, not yet. I hope that we will get there soon.
How would you define bullying? You said that the school needs to have a definition of it.
It's complicated. I mean, there's different types of ways of describing bullying. I think the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education views it as, and don't quote me on this, but I'm fairly certain it's repeated taunting, if you will, by one particular party. So it would have to be, the same student making fun of another student, for example, more than once, twice, 3 times. But again, it has to be well documented, which doesn't always happen. So if you go to the school and say something once, twice, 3 times, but it's not being documented, there's no way of verifying that.
So the teachers need to be alert to it and make...
And I realize that it's a lot of paperwork, but even for me as a parent, I didn't know that there's a form online. You have to go to the school's website, which we all know is not completely up to date, and then we have to go to the bullying prevention plan, so you have to sort through some files, and then within the bullying prevention plan, then there's a form that you're supposed to fill out whenever a concern or an incident, and that way you would have a paper trail. But when you go to the school and say, hey, I'm having this issue, they don't prompt you to go, hey, I need you to go to the website, here's the form, fill it out so that we can have a track record. Nobody tells you that. So to me, therein lies a big communication issue. So, when parents say there's been bullying, well, the school says, well, it's kids will be kids, but at some point we have to address how kids are being kids. It's not always okay to be mean. We need to really change the environment within the school. I just really wish we could teach children how to be nice to each other. If that, easier said than done. But I think having more people around picking up on it and keeping track of it also alerts people to, okay, well, how do we change this? If it's a systemic issue, let's address that. How do we get, people to come into the school and help us? There are people that will do it for free. They that work for the state. They will come in and they will advise the district. They will hold assemblies with the students and help them understand the importance.
That's a good resource.
Exactly. So I feel they're being underutilized, really. So I'd like to see that really improve.
So school choice is a big issue. What would you do to encourage Gloucester students to choose Gloucester schools when they're opting for school choice?
Well, I think Gloucester schools have a lot of really excellent programming. We do. We have a lot of excellent programming. Ultimately, it really is a personal family choice and what works for them. Gloucester does have a diverse population. And I know some people have said before that that's part of the reason why people opt to choose out. But I would reinforce that. Statistics have shown that, and all of the data really up until this point has shown that diverse populations within a school system actually helps improve average test scores, which is something that a lot of people don't know about. It is interesting. It also helps foster a sense of empathy within our students. It helps them get a broader perspective on society as a whole. It gives them a better representation of what the world is like. So I think, in effect, it really does help them develop a better, higher order thinking when you are able to, utilize those, really just develop those relationships with the people around you. And
makes the kids more open-minded. If their minds are open, maybe they'll learn something during the course of the day.
It's true. I mean, if you think
interesting.
about it, if you have a very narrow experience, you only are able to learn what's within that narrow experience. But when you are able to see it from the vantage point of, other students, different cultures, different experiences, you really have a much broader idea of what the world is like, which in essence, helps prepare you better for life in the real world. Because, again, we're not always going to be on that narrow path.
Yes, several of the candidates have talked about just communicating, the schools communicating with the parents and just making them understand how good the school system is and what it can offer. That's very interesting. Well, in the 2 minutes remaining to us, I'd like to ask you to address the voters again directly. Tell them anything that was not included in the questions we asked and ask for their vote.
Thank you. Again, my name is Ida Shaker. I am number 4 on the ballot. If elected, I will continue to make sure that policies and goals are set to address the needs of all students, and I will continue to advocate for the needs of children. Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I want to thank Ida Shaker for agreeing to be interviewed. I want to thank 1623 Studios for filming these interviews and remind you all, please vote on November 5th.
Thank you very much, June.